Okay. Yeah, you can go ahead. I think you can explain about the schedule, about the training schedule, and what are the topics you are going to cover, and what is your agenda for today, tomorrow, and after.
Yeah.
I will leave it to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's great. Good morning, everyone. I'm Rachel Addison, and I'm the business analyst from Berent that will take you through the training over the next couple of days. As mentioned, there's different types of training going on. It's the functional training that I will be taking you through, split into 3 different sections over the 3 days. So that's split into authoring training, admin training, and agent training. So today is going to be the authoring training, and I'll run through our explicit agenda of what that's going to cover in a second. And then, as mentioned, I think next week or in the coming sessions will be the more technical training. And to my understanding, that'll be run by our technical architect, Dagna. So she will take you through the more technical aspects of the knowledge management. So for today, for our authoring, this is the first part of our agenda. We will split, as best to my ability, the session into 2 with an hour's break. So for your time zone, I think we will run the first session to about 2 p.m. We will take a break for an hour and then we will rejoin for the second. So for the first part of the session, I will run through the training presentation. So I will go through the different aspects and features, talk you through how they work, and the session will always be open for questions. I can stop and give examples, go through anything, and then I will also be able to log into the system that we have available to us today to go into some live demonstrations. So I'll be able to go into the system and show you firsthand the aspects of the features that we've spoke about within the session. And then the second part, we have some hands-on exercises. Hopefully everybody saw the update on the email invite. If not, at the time I can reshare those PDFs. But we have the hands-on exercises that you will yourself be able to run through and access the system.
Yeah, I have sent those. I have forwarded those exercise attachment to the all other attendees. I think in your email, some of them were missed, and I have forwarded to all others. So
Perfect.
hopefully,
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So yep, hopefully you have those PDFs. So once we get to that section, you'll be able to log into the system and have some hands-on experience of using the system and going through those exercises. As I said, then we will stop for a break, covering any questions required at that time. And then primarily the second session will be continuing through those exercises to completion. And then we have an allocated time to go over any other questions or topics that you'd like to discuss. And then we'll wrap up for the authoring training. Okay, is that clear for our agenda or the objectives for today's session? Are there any questions around the agenda that I've just ran through? Any comments that would be good to talk about just now? I know that we may need to break before the official break. That's fine as well. We can discuss that as and when those times come up.
yeah, we are fine with the agenda. You may please go ahead.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, so our course objectives for today is to explore the knowledge management, the authoring process, along with reviewing, seeing how to create the different styles and types of knowledge content, and also to touch on the searching as well from an agent and customer's perspective. So our course objectives for today are all around the authoring perspective in the KM application. So there'll be 2 topics. There'll be the exercise manual, as I've spoke about, the PDFs, and also this presentation pack that I will run through and stop at each section and cover some live demonstrations to show the topics that I've been covering. So first of all, we'll do a quick introduction to knowledge management, what it is and the objectives of the application. We'll go through the different types of roles and workflow. So there's different roles that the agents and the team can be using when accessing the system with different access. So we'll discuss this. Actually authoring the content itself. So the screens and pages that can be used to create and then publish the knowledge. and then different types of content being reused, searching, and best practices as well. So to start off, we'll just go into a light touch introduction of the knowledge management system. And hopefully this will provide you an introduction and a view of the advantages of how the system will be used by the organisations. So first off, we touch on what knowledge management is. So knowledge management is the act of organising, managing and delivering specific information in context to the user at the time that is best needed. So providing the right information at the right time to the right people so that the agents can make the right decisions. So this is the foundation objective of knowledge management and why it is being used. So there's two different types of the management that we can talk about. Content management, so that's actually focusing on the accuracy and the readability of the content itself. So the primary goal of the content management is to make sure the content is maintained and the quality is of the expected level. And then the knowledge management itself, focusing on, as I said, delivering it to the right people at the right time in the appropriate context as well. So the knowledge management enables for explicit and tacit knowledge. So this is both knowledge that is gained through personal experience, information that employees perhaps have in their head, so tacit knowledge through experience of being in the company for a long time. And then explicit knowledge, so including like reports, policy statements, or procedures. So the knowledge management application enables both types of knowledge to be created and shared throughout everyone in the organisation and to be used from one main source to answering the customers. So reasons why we would do this is the amount of time available and experience. So if an agent that has only been working for a month, they don't necessarily have to go and ask and spend a lot of time gathering knowledge. With the tacit and explicit knowledge being created in the system, they have everything available to them at their fingertips and to be able to search for that when they need that at most. Okay. Why else we would do this? Also, there's early retirements and increased mobility. So being able to lead if there's gaps of knowledge, if there's anything that isn't covered, then having it all in this single source application can easily identify if there's any type of content gap or missing or things that need to be archived, perhaps out of date information that can be then retired and then not available within the system so that the correct information is given at all times. Also, with frequent changes to things like legislation and policies, the application allows for continual updates for the content in the system, meaning that only the very most up-to-date version of the content is available to the agents. There would be no out-of-date information. They can be updated and keep in time with the legislation and policies. And also improving the customer service, faster problem solving, so giving the agents the ability to quickly identify the information that they require at the time and really getting the improved customer service when they're looking for that information. So why customers would use it? So dramatically improving the first point of contact. So customers perhaps doing the phone call first to get the answer from the agent. If they're utilising the knowledge in correct way, then they can easily search and create a fast response time for that customer without having the customer having to go to other channels and creating a longer process. Creating the knowledge base around both internal and external content. So as I said, creating this content from both internal sources that have been written in policies and documents, but also external knowledge and understanding from people's experience and taking that all from the different sources and creating it into one knowledge base available to then everybody. Within the organizations, they also have the ability then to author and manage the articles, which means that you have the full view and capabilities of understanding the knowledge and the content that is being used by the agents. Some typical organizations would perhaps know that their agents use things like pieces of paper or documents on their desk. Authors and managers then have the ability to know within the organization that the knowledge base is covering these aspects, and that is what the agents are using for the customer experiences. And also, not going to be touched in too much detail for this course, but the exposure for external audiences. So there is the capability for KM to expose the information created in the knowledge base to an external audience, something like a website. Okay, so we have an image here to display the knowledge management in action. So what I'll do is I'll just talk about each different section so that we can visualize what's happening in the process of getting the content into the system. So first off, we need to decide what goes into the system. So going through the authoring workflow, things like articles and alerts, any documents, FAQs. So there's the different types of content to create. As an administrator, you can also then include things like websites or pages, files, directories. So there's lots of different items that can be added. These should be then identified. Once they've been identified, we can then look to add them into the system. So then the things to be thinking about when you've identified the data to go in would be how to put it into the system. So should it be available private v public? We'll look at examples of this later on, but there's two different types of content going in, private or public, and then categorizing it. So adding in the different types of categories that will help with searching, and we will go into a lot more detail about this tagging system shortly. And each piece of data that goes in will then have associated metadata, so unique IDs, all the creation information, things like when it was created and who it was authored by. We then also need to think about the data. Does it relate to anything else in the system? Will it benefit being related to anything else if an agent needs to look at similar documents? Any attachments required? Any weighting that should be added to the search to make sure it is either pushed up the results, so it's something that's more important, but also how it will be indexed as well. So things like the formatting, making sure paragraphs and the headings make the information that's most important really stand out. And also thinking, is it relevant? So the ability to retire the information once it's no longer needed. So when processing the data, these are the key elements that are thought about when taking it from the raw data and putting it into the system itself. So once that's been identified, then the decision can be made for who should have the visibility of that content. So as I said, there's public and private content. So perhaps people with different access would require the public version of content versus the private. But there's also different ways that we can have the content visible, and this is through the use of what we call entitlements. So entitlements can be allocated to the content at creation for the use of either, for example, an individual or a team, and then only that team or individual would have access to that content. So we'd be able to restrict the content depending on the type of content that it is, for example. So here we have UK holidays. So perhaps we have an entitlement for UK breaks, and only people in the team regarding UK holidays would have access to that content. Anyone that doesn't have that entitlement means that if they were looking in the knowledge base, they wouldn't be able to see this information. So we have that flexibility within the system to be able to restrict access to certain pieces of content. Okay, then at the very end, once we have the data in and created as content and any restrictions added, it's down to the users themselves accessing it from the front end. So we have different types of users. We have authors that are creating the content. We have reviewers who can check if the content is okay and make any decisions if it needs to be edited or given back to the author. And then we have our managers who have the one last check to then publish the content into the system. And once it's published, the agents in the front end will be able to use and search for that content in the application. And then the other roles that we have are administrators. We'll go into a lot more detail of what the administrator's role will look like in the admin training tomorrow. And the last two are agents themselves, so they have their standalone access to the system for searching and viewing the content, giving any feedback. And the last one we have there is something that can be used if the organisation has decided to give access for something like their website to look into the knowledge base, so that would be considered a customer. So getting that information from the website.
So you will be covering role of agents in the tomorrow's session, right?
The role of agents, I think, is in Wednesday's session, actually. Tomorrow is for the administrator's session.
Okay. Okay.
But yes, we will cover in full detail the different roles for administrator and employee. And today we will cover the author, reviewer, and manager, so the creation of the content. Okay, so just to give you an overview of the screens that I will be showing you in a lot more detail over the course of this session. So this is the searching interface for the employee. So we can see here we have lots of different categories and filters available on the left-hand panel. And you can see here that they are clickable links. So if we click these different categories or tags, categorizations that have been used, we can use these to search for the content in the system. And we also have a free text area here where we can type in any keywords or phrases that we want to look for specifically in the content available. Below this, you'll see the results. So we can see here that this is the currently shown results within the system, articles, any of the content created. And to our right, we see the preview of the currently selected article. So this is giving us all the information that's in the article. So we can see here, it's got some public information, and we can see these are the tags that have been assigned here. Okay, so as I said, we'll go into a lot more detail of what this screen is and how to use it in the coming sessions.
Excuse me, guys. Please stop Rachel wherever you have any doubt. You need more clarification. Let us have this session as very interactive session to take the maximum benefit out of it.
Yep, definitely. Please don't be afraid to stop me or ask any questions during the session. Certainly. Okay, so this is the searching interface, and then the next interface is the authoring one. So as you can see here, we now have our text editor with all the expected functions of creating the text. And we can see here we have title and all of the metadata that I spoke about, so things like the unique ID and the author creation. Again, this is a screen that I will go into a demonstration with a lot more detail, but just to give you a quick overview of the screen and what it will look like when we're using it. Okay, so that was a quick introduction. Now we'll go and look into the default workflow and roles within the KM system. So I'll go over a high-level overview of the default authoring and workflowing roles and what they have in the system, what they're able to do. So here are by default the 4 main roles within knowledge management. You can see we have KM author, KM reviewer, KM manager, and then the agent. So KM authors, as it sounds in the description, they author the content. So once a KM author has created a piece of content, they then, going through the workflow, have the ability to submit it for review. Once it's submitted for review, the KM reviewer can then pick this up and review it, so they can decide if the content looks okay, make any edits, and have a look to see if they're happy with the content that the author has created. If they are, the reviewer then has the ability to approve, which sends this to the manager. The manager then can view the content that's been reviewed and have a look for themselves and make the last check to see if the content is all looking okay. Once that's been decided, the manager then has the ability to publish, and only once content is published will it be available to the KM agent to be able to search and look for in the system. So up until that point, before publishing, it is only available within the workflow management roles. So the author, reviewer, and manager. Agents will only see content once it has been published. Okay, so this diagram shows a very happy path where everything is okay and it's being submitted for review, then for approval and for publish. But if there was something wrong with the content or something being needing changed, the content can be pushed back the way through the workflow. So if the reviewer was to read the content and decide it needs changed or something altered, they can then reject and push this content back to the author for re-review. Similarly, the manager can decide not to publish and reject, giving reason why and pushing it back to the two roles previously. Okay, are there any questions around the roles? These are obviously, as I mentioned, the default roles. If organisations have any different processes, then it can be changed through the technical changes.
Yeah, Rachel, one question. Can you
Yep,
hear me?
yep, I can hear you.
Yeah, so you mean the author, the reviewer, and the manager, all three can edit the content?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and the reviewer can approve and manager can publish.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, fine.
Yes, hi Resh.
Hi.
Is it possible to add other than these roles like supervisor or more roles depending upon the customer's requirement, or is this the only four default roles we can have it in the system?
No, as I said, this is the default. So this is the default roles that almost come suggested with the knowledge management. But you can create further roles or further profiles for different kind of more levels of checking, if you like. Obviously, there is a restriction in terms of there's only one um, type of pushing, so you can't add any more types of review or approve or publish. These options will stay the same. It will always be publishing, it will always be approving. But if there's different types or different names of process, then that can be created and hopefully tailored to meet what the customer is requiring.
Okay.
Okay, that's maybe something that we'll probably go into more detail in the admin training tomorrow when we look about what the actual profiles look like and the setup of the users. So that's definitely something that if you want to bring that back up tomorrow, it's something that we can perhaps give a demonstration for during the admin training. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so these are our roles and the movements between those in the workflow. So when the content is being authored, the authoring of knowledge can be split into different sections, as we can see here. The author, when they're in their profile, they can create the different types of content, and each content has these different aspects attached to them. So we have a separate section for public information and private information. So if an organisation deems something to be perhaps only information that they want to be shared with the customer, then that can be added to the public. And if there's any reason for any content to be internal only, then that can be added to the private information, for example. The content can be related, so if there's existing content in the system that the author would think that creating this new content would be beneficial to relate to it, then we can relate it to existing content, meaning that when the KM agents are looking at one piece of content, they can readily have available within the same screen something that's linked to a similar piece of content without having to search or refilter. The author then has the job of adding tags, which is important for adding to the categorization of the content. So when the agents are looking for the content, they're searching. The tags are really a very powerful way to categorize that content into the system, and we'll look at examples of those shortly. And there's also the metadata. So as I said, things like the unique identifier, any access control, things like the dates, publishing dates as well. The content can also have attachments or notes added, so anything that would deem beneficial to add to the content. Notes can be used throughout the workflow process. They'll not be visible to the agent front end. These are notes for the authoring team, so perhaps reasons why things have been added, draft notes. They can be added so that when the authors and the reviewers, managers are looking at the content, they can read the notes and understand the process or the lifespan of what the authoring has been doing. Okay, and then as I mentioned, as an author, we then have the ability to submit for review. Or the other option we have is to save as a draft. So if we're an author and we're in the middle of creating something, but we're not quite ready to fully submit it for review, perhaps we need to come back to it, then we can save it as a draft and we can come back to it later, and it will save it in the current state that it's in. Once we submit it for review, that will then go into the work list and it will be a task assigned to the KM reviewers. So the KM reviewers can come into this work list, pick up the piece of content, and when they open it, they then have various actions available to them. So the first one is save for later. So if the reviewer is looking at some content and for whatever reason they are not in the position to review it as of just now, they can hit save for later and it will put it back into the work list for them to review later. They can reject the content. So for whatever reason, if they've read the content and deemed it not correct or needing a little bit more work, they can select reject, and then the notes gives them the opportunity to explain why they're rejecting it. So in this example, spell check please. And once that's been rejected, it would then go back to the author for them to rework, and they would then be able to read this note and understand why the reviewer has rejected it. Review. Oh, yeah.
Can I have a quick question?
Yep, sure.
When we attach any file to the content, will we be able to preview the attachment, or do we have to download it and view it?
It typically can sometimes depend on the browser and the type of attachment, but for your common types of attachments like PDF or Word documents, then selecting it should preview within the system. You should be able to preview it within the application itself.
So that behavior is the same when it is published to an agent also, right? So the agent can preview it before, he doesn't need to download that attachment to view what is inside it, right?
That is my understanding, yes. What we can do is when I go into the demonstration, I can give you a demonstration of that during the authoring process to show you.
Okay, fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Yes, another question. What is the meaning of restore?
What's the meaning of what, sorry?
Restore.
Restore.
Put back in queue. Yeah.
Oh, yep. So restore would be if the reviewer has picked up the content from the work list, and for whatever reason they can't work on it, or it's perhaps something that they don't have the ability or the knowledge to review. Perhaps it's for a topic for someone else to review from another type. Then restoring it will put it back into the queue for anyone else to pick it up. So it's very similar to save for later, but save for later will mark the reviewer's name against that item. So if I take a piece of content and I decide to save it for later, it will then be targeted to me and my name will be against it. Whereas if I restore it, it will just simply go back into the queue untouched, ready for someone else to look at it.
So it will roll back any changes I made.
Yes.
And the audit trail that I access this will be removed, or the audit trail will be there.
Audit trail, do you mean so if there's something that's been changed and then restored?
Yeah,
You
like
have
I picked
visibility?
it up. I picked it up at this time. I restored it at this time. Will those audit trails be available?
Not to the reviewer, to my understanding. There may be something that an admin or a report might show, but I'm not aware of the reviewer at that stage having any visibility.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, Rachel. Like, can we have different queues for different departments, or is it a single queue, the inbox?
So by default, there's one inbox, but new queues can be created. The only administration to maintain that would be required is if you want to have them separated. It would be a manual task to move them into that queue. Because the way the system has been configured, everything by default goes into specific queues, but that doesn't mean to say that you can't create different queues and manually triage them into those different queues.
Okay. So we have to manually move the articles to the different queues.
Yes, for example, if a specific reviewer team would want it in a specific queue, the system's going to always give it to the default queue first, but you will have the ability to manually triage them into specific areas if required.
Rachel, excuse me.
Yep.
Regarding the workflow, like you have author, reviewer, and manager.
Yep.
Do we have any customized workflows? Can any organization keep any customized workflows?
Customized workflows. I know of customers kind of renaming and adding different levels, but customized workflows, is that the type of customization you were thinking of, or something more in?
No, is there any any bypassing of any roles here? I mean, can we set any bypassing of the roles?
Oh, yeah, no, certainly. The roles that we spoke about, these are the default roles, but by no means these are the mandatory roles to be used. So if I go back a few slides, this is the full step process, so author, reviewer, and manager. But if, for example, a customer does not require any kind of reviewing or approving, then they can simply set up their users as, for example, managers who can create and publish within the same steps. So
Okay.
it can be tailored to whichever step of approval they need. If a customer says, yes, we do want people to approve it, but we don't want a review and an approve, we just want an approve, then the first step for them would be, for example, a reviewer.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. So again, as a reviewer, one of the other options that we have is to edit. So as a reviewer, if we're reading the content and we've decided that it is looking good and we would approve it, but perhaps there's something very quickly that I can change as a reviewer, perhaps an incorrect date or a timing issue, perhaps writing 24 words, then I can edit it myself very quickly without having to put it back through the process of authors. And I can edit that, create that, and update it, and then I can select approve. And as I said, this would then go to the managers for the last check before approving. So as a reviewer, I can quickly edit as well if required.
Another question.
Yep.
For all reviewers, there will be a single inbox, or each reviewer will have his own inbox.
It is a shared work list, a shared box.
Okay, so what is the meaning of reassign?
So reassign if the reviewer is looking at the content, and from the expertise or the knowledge that I have as a reviewer, I know that there's someone else within my team that would be better to review it, then I can reassign it specifically to them to look at, and it will appear in the list in the box targeted at them specifically.
Okay, so when you reassign, it will be in the specific inbox of that reviewer.
No, it actually stays within the same box, but it will be targeted to the agent. So everyone still has full visibility of the same box, but you can see in the targets that someone specific has been labeled to look at this content.
Okay.
Okay. And then, as we said, approve would then put this content through the workflow into the manager's work list for then the last check of the content. So this is the reviewer and all the options that we have for this role. So once we approve, Publishing the knowledge is one of the tasks for the managers. Again, accessing the same work list, they can then pick up the content, and they have very similar actions. They can save for later, so mark it for themselves, put themselves as a target, put it back into the list for coming back to later. They can reject, giving any optional notes. They themselves again can make a quick edit if required. They can reassign to another manager, and they can restore as well. The only difference here is that they have the main button here for publishing. So once they publish, the content is then available in the system for searching by the agents. Okay. So once the content is available in the system, the KM agent has some tasks. They obviously can use the system to search for the content and filter, but they also have the ability to give feedback on the currently published content. So you can see here that I'm giving some feedback on the content that I'm looking at, and it's been labeled as out of date. So if I've read this as an agent and I've deciphered that I think what has been published is not currently correct, it's out of date, I can categorize my feedback and give some comments. And when I submit this piece of feedback, it goes to the author of the content into their inbox. They can then pick this up, read the content feedback, and perhaps make any updates that are required to the knowledge. Okay.
Yeah, so this update goes through the complete process again, right? Reviewing and approving.
Yes, so if as an author you're correct, if I make any changes from the receiving feedback, if I then make some changes, whichever authoring process or workflow process is in place would then go back through the approval process.
Okay, so how does the system know that this change is based on this feedback? That is how you are notifying back to the agent, right? So how do the system know that this change is based on the feedback?
It won't necessarily know that it's come from feedback. It will be linked. You'll be able to see. So when you open the feedback, it opens up the specific article that the author can then edit. But once the author is editing, the function is as if you're creating it from scratch. It wouldn't give you any other indication that it's come or been triggered from giving feedback.
Then how is this automatic notification work?
Oh, so the automatic notification, this is if the agent has signed up to be notified. So there is a checkbox that we can make available on the feedback box that says that if you give feedback, you can opt to say that you want to be alerted if there's any updates made for the content that you've given feedback on. And that means that if the author does make a change and the content is updated, you will then be notified to your email address that you've typed in of what the change was. So was the content updated after your feedback, or was it archived, or what was the action from the result of you giving feedback?
Okay.
Okay. So as a KM manager, we have that important publish button, but also as a KM manager, we also have the ability to create content in the one quick step as well. So as was mentioned there, the different levels of profiles, they're not mandatory, these are the default ones. So if a customer, for example, wants quick access to someone to creating and publishing straight away, then the single use of the manager profile can be done. So they'd be accessing the system, creating the content and publishing it within the same instance, and then straight away it'll be available for the agents.
In the previous slide, I could see that there is something regarding cloud considerations. What is it actually regarding?
So this again is to do with if the organisation has decided to expose the content to something like their website. So obviously agents giving feedback in this example is someone using the knowledge management application, but there is a cloud consideration if, for example, you want then customers to be able to give content feedback. So do you want customers to be able to give feedback from the website? And then that's something that the cloud and the technical decisions would be done to enable that. So you'd be getting feedback from both agents and customers.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, is there any other questions around the workflow or roles for just now? Obviously, we'll go into demonstrations of those shortly. But if there's any other questions just now that I can help with. No, okay, good to carry on. Okay, so the next few slides that we have and my first demonstration will be authoring the content. So as we said, the authoring, reviewing and publishing are the workflow steps that are available when we're creating the content. So first thing to talk about is the different types of content that we have in the system. So as you can see here at the top, created by the KM authors, we have these 5 different types of content. We have articles, alerts, FAQs, uploaded documents, and we have segments. So I'll go into detail of what each of those are and what they mean. But there's also configuration available for content sources. So again, at an admin level, the more technical side, if organizations are wanting to expose to something like a website, they can also then add the content sources from websites, for example, as well. But for just now, we will just concentrate on the creation within the system. So these 5 items here. Okay, so we can see here on the right, this is an example of what they'll look like in the system. So you can see there's a different icon for each, indicating which different type is being used. So you can see here the article. So this is typically a page of formatted text or images, and this would appear in this purple icon here when searched for in the system. This is probably the most commonly used type, and can be used for linking as well. So as I said, relating to different content. So it can be lots of different documents can be split up into different articles and then linked. But articles, I would say, is our most common type being used in the KM. Next one is alert. So the difference between alert and an article is the urgency. So you can see here that it has a very immediate looking icon with the exclamation mark. And alerts are used for quick information that is important, perhaps updates. In the last few months, I can imagine lots of our customers are using these for COVID updates. So something that's important, something that's not necessarily a long written article with lots of information, something that's timely and concise piece of information that's been used to grab attention of the agent. And then the next one is an FAQ, so frequently asked question, shown with the blue icon here. And this can be either an individual answer and question, or it can also be used as a cluster. So it can be one question per item, or it can be perhaps multiple answers and questions within a group. And then the next type is upload document, shown with this green icon here. So these are for documents that perhaps are not reproducible in an article form, for example, and also things that can be put up for branding and copyright information, for example, like PDFs or long PowerPoints. The only thing that we really need to make sure that the understanding is there for when using uploaded documents is that only the title and the description will be used in any keyword searching. So the content of the upload, any written text in the upload itself, will not be reachable by our search engines. That will only be the title given and the description given. So when I go into demonstration, I will show you those 2 fields that I'm speaking about. And then the last type is segment. Segments don't actually show visible to agents, and you will hopefully understand why once I explain what a segment is. So a segment is a reusable piece of content that updates dynamically. So you can see here, this example is an address. So this segment is then created for this contact address, and perhaps multiple articles would reference this address. And what you would do is when you're creating the article, you would embed this segment. And what this means is, if this address or perhaps the office was ever to change, these details would need updated. And instead of working lots of articles, you would just change the one segment, and anywhere the segment has been used, it would dynamically update. So if, for example, 10 different articles have used this address segment, you would simply change the segment to the new address and all 10 articles would be updated automatically. Okay. Are there any questions around the different types? No. Okay. Okay, so authoring content, first step of the process is obviously to create the content, and then very importantly is to apply our tags to categorize that information and do any of the metadata settings that are required. And then as an author, our last fields that we have are to either save or submit for review. So when we're authoring the content, we can see here that we've got the different areas that we can populate. We've got private and we've got public. So we can see here they're shown by the different green and red areas. And as I said, this can be used for either identifying information that should and should not be shared with a customer. So public information can be deemed, for example, as customer friendly, and private information perhaps is information for only internal use. Again, this has also been used by some customers when exposed to external facing things like websites. So you can see here, for example, this banking example has exposed KM on their website, and in this instance, only the public information will be available. Private information within KM would not be exposed if this is used. Okay, so when you're creating content, the public and private sections, they're not mandatory. You don't need to have content in both. You could have content in just private or just public, but it is there in case the organisation want to use that different way of identifying if the information is private or public.
One question, I don't know whether you will bring this up later, but the question is how can we bring KM information to a website? Like, do you expose some APIs or how exactly are we going to achieve something like this?
It's a little bit out of my expertise, but I know that it is done through API calls, yes. This is something that's probably going to be picked up in the technical sessions next week of how that can be done. I just know from the functional point of view that if it is done, then this is what it would be working as. But in terms of how it's done, that's something that hopefully my colleague Dagna will be able to explain to you next week.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. One of the other elements when we're creating content that's important or is commonly used is the featured ability. So when we're creating content, one of the options that we have available is to mark it as featured, and this means that it will appear separately in some filtering and can be considered as top or important information. When it's searched for, or if any keywords are used, if it's been marked as featured, it will appear higher up in the results. So when you're creating content, you can see here this top flag here next to the title has the featured content flag. So when you're creating content, if you select this piece of content will then be considered as featured and be available in the filtering for featured and also appear higher up in the results when searching for.
Excuse me, can we make this featured for a limited time period, for example, featured for this week, like some promotion, which is only for this week? Can we give a deadline for the featuring?
No, unfortunately, this flag is either on or off. It doesn't have any time span attached to it, unfortunately.
Okay.
So if you mark something as featured and then no longer require it as featured, a reviewer or manager author would need to come in and edit it and then remove the flag.
Okay.
Okay. So you can see here we have the title. So we're currently creating an article going by the icon used. So we have the title that we can type in here. And we then have our different tabs and areas for creating the content. So we've got the public information tab and the private information tab. And then the last two are tags and related content. So tags is where we can then add that level of categorization. And related content is where we can search for any existing content to link to this article. That means that when the agent's looking at it, the other content that's related will also be available within that view. So you can see here we've got different image buttons and insert buttons. So we can insert an image or a URL from a library, or we can insert templates as well. So if there's templates being used, for example, disclaimers or layouts, then if they've been created in the system, they can be inserted into the text editor area.
Can we embed videos like in an article?
If I go to my next slide, I think it explains the different. We do have links, the ability to embed links, but I know that this will fully depend on the security added at the operational level, depending on if external videos are allowed to be inserted. But you can insert links and embed links through the editor here. As I said, specific types of videos or specific platforms with videos, it may depend on security settings.
Okay.
Okay. So
I
next we
have
have, yeah,
another question.
sure.
Do you support right to left text? Suppose if you are typing in Arabic. So
Yes. Yep. So the editor is, you can see here we have the different indenting left to right, and we also have in the drop down, I can show you in the demonstration, alignment from right to left as well that can be applied in the editor.
okay, but if numbers are coming in between the sentence, the numbers will be from left to right, and the words will be right to left. So we can align it separately, or will it jumble up once we save the document?
I've never seen that example used before. What I can do is I can take a little note of that, and when I go into the system, I can go into an example of what that would do. Personally, I've not tried that type of formatting yet, but I will take a note, and perhaps when I'm going through that, you can explain to me the different examples of what you were referring to going right to left. I can explain that then.
Okay.
Okay. So when you're looking at the editor initially, you have this one line here, and then you can see the expand ribbon can be used for the full advanced editor. So we've got lots of different usual formatting buttons available to us within this editor. Probably one of the most common ones I think for KM as well is the first one here, full screen. So if you're creating a long piece of content and they want the full text area, they can actually use this button to fill their full browser screen with just the editor while they're creating. That's one of the most highly requested buttons and most used, I would say, when creating content that's lengthy. And we also have spell checker as well. Okay, and then similarly, the private information tab, same editor, same ability to create and add images and templates into this information. This would then appear on that private information within that red section on the content. Okay. One of the other features to talk about in the editor is the expandable and collapsible button here. So you can see this little arrow. If we use that in the editor, then this will allow us to create headers and content, which means that you can create lots of snippets of information that will be by default closed when looked at, but the agent can then expand and read the body, the content of that area. So for example, this would be used probably most regularly in a step guide or a process guide. So if there's lots of different steps for a process, perhaps each header would be step 1, step 2, and then you would expand to see the content, so the items involved with each of those. And you can see here on this example here, we can see that this as a related link. Of the article.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think we have to use the HTML template.
Yep, that was going to be my suggestion. I don't think there's a way to do it through the editor, but you do have the access to the source code, the HTML. So I think that would perhaps be a way that you could achieve it.
So it is possible through HTML, I mean, accessing the source code?
I think that would be the way that you would need to do it. Yes, I'm not aware of any button that's automatically going to set the image as a background. The editor fields that we have here are more to do with the content and the text itself, and added images separately. I could look into if there's an easier way, but I think the source code is definitely somewhere that I would think to achieve that.
Okay.
Okay. And one of the other features to make you aware of is once you've created a piece of content, one of the options available is to copy, so to create a clone. So if, for example, there's an article being created about information, and the author wants to create content based on that article, then they can select copy, and then the content will be copied into a new blank source with a new version, new ID, but with the initial information included in this clone. So, for example, issues with layouts. So, if you're wanting to copy the layout, perhaps there's tables with certain information in certain ways, and you can copy the article and then change the, the actual content of the data for the new product. For example, if there's a product layout, then you can copy it, and then it would reduce the time if you were trying to start from scratch. You can simply copy that article and create the updated version with the different information. Okay, and as it says here, importantly, copying content doesn't act as a link, a backlink to any source. It's essentially the same as if you were to create new content. The only difference is you're starting off with the base data that was in the article that you've copied. So there's no link once you've copied. Okay, so that was all about the content itself. Now to touch on applying tags and the different settings for each piece of content we can create. So tags and tag sets are the important ways of being able to classify and categorize the content when it's in the system. So when our agents are accessing the KM application, when they're looking for articles or looking for information, apart from being able to search for keywords, one of the very important and very strong ways of searching is using these tags. So being able to drill down into the different tag sets that have been created and applied to the content. So the different tag sets, there's 4 different tag sets that by default are categorized as knowledge base, region, product, and topic. These can be renamed if the organization have a very specific process or way of working in their business that perhaps region, topic, and product do not align with. So perhaps if they have another kind of aspect of their business that region would not make sense, they could perhaps change this to something more relevant to their business. But there is 4 main tag sets that are used when adding these into the knowledge. So when you're creating the content, one of the tabs available is the tags tab, and you can see here is our 4 different tag sets that we can add into here. So we can simply type in the tag and it will search in the box, or we can select the add button and we can pick from the list. It's very important to try to explain to customers that at this stage adding tags is very crucial and important because it really adds to the strength of the searching and the filtering within the system. If they're creating content and not adding any tags, then they're fully relying on the keyword and the phrase searching, which can be used well, but it's definitely not as powerful as being able to add this categorization at the tag level. So we really do try to make sure that customers, where possible, are adding as many tags to make sure that this information is then categorized into the specific area of the business that the agents can then filter for. Okay, any questions around tags?
Yeah, I have a question here.
Sure.
Yeah, I see that you are when you click add, you said that we have to select from a list. And also when we click knowledge base, whatever we write, it will also search from specific also list. So we cannot just add the new tags on the fly while adding the content.
No, that is correct. Adding tags is a job of the admin, because these are the underlying way of how the content is created. You as an author, you will not have the ability to add your standalone tags. They're globally shared within the whole application. All users use the same tags, and it's part of the KM admin team to maintain those tags.
So the author doesn't have the options to add new tags.
No, no, selecting from the existing list.
Or even tags for that specific article. يعني most of the blogs or whatever I write يعني I specify the words that which I author يعني. There's no option for this. Huh? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. As I said, if no tags are being used, or as well as being tags being used, the search, the keyword search that the agents can do will use the content and the title for any keywords. So if you're searching for perhaps a keyword that's been used, billing or payments, that's perhaps been used in the content. It's not necessarily a tag. That will still work. That functionality is always available, even if tags have not been used. But as I said, the more kind of strong way of creating that filtering is through these tags.
Rachel, this knowledge base, product, topic, and region. So we can have some other options also, right? We can create our.
Yep. So there will always be 4, but you can rename them. They can be renamed, so they don't always. This one doesn't need to be called product. It can be branch, or anything for specific. But there will always only be 4. You can't add more tag sets, but you can rename the tag sets.
We cannot add more, but we can rename it, right?
Yes, there will always be 4, but they can be renamed.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So tags and tag sets in the content. Hopefully that's clear. One of the other aspects of tags that we can create is called cross tagging. So this is defined to make sure that any tags that are not related are filtered out. So for example, we have a little example here. As a member of the UK business, I should only see product tags that are relevant to my division when I author content. So if there's lots of different business types and different business areas when the system is being used, lots of different tags might be used. And as you can imagine, if you have a long list of tags, the customer may say that they only want to see ones that are relevant. So creating this tag set relationship, cross tagging, means that if, for example, the UK region tag has been cross tagged with the UK products, that means that you're only going to be able to see the UK products when that UK region tag has been selected. So the administrators can create that tag set relationship, and then depending on the settings, some tags might be auto-selected or auto-added, but then that means that you can restrict the view of tags to only the ones that are relevant for the division, for example. So it's not mandatory, it's not something that is done, but it can be added if the business has lots of different, as I said, areas, regions, long lists of tags that they would see fit to make sure that only the relevant divisions see the specific tags that they've created. As this is done by an admin, we'll go into more detail and examples of how this actually works tomorrow in tomorrow's admin session.
One question.
Yep.
Yeah, this tag set relationship, is it between the different tags like region and product, or is it associated with the user? For example, I am a user who is associated with the product. So this product tag will be automatically filtered. Or if I belong to a particular region, then this tag is auto filtered. Is it like that, or is it only between the tags? Is there a relationship between the user and the tags?
It can be added. That's the way that it can be set up. So as it says at the bottom, depending on the setting, So if we have a UK user and they select a UK product, if they've been given the specific UK region as a setting, that means that the relationship will be with that tag and the agent, and then only the tags that have been crossed with that will be visible. But it depends on the setting, it depends on the setup, because any tag can be explicitly added to an agent for automatic setting, for example. It restricts the view, but it can be done depending on what level. Not necessarily product, it can be region or it can be knowledge base as well. But if the tag is added to the agent, then it will be pre-filtered on their view when they're creating. But it can be altered as required, as it says. The different cross tagging can be used if there's too many, or if there's different areas that should be only seeing specific tags. But it can be configured at any level that is required. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So next to talk about our different metadata on the content. So as we can see here, we have a publishing schedule available. So when you're creating content, by default, it will start to publish right now at the current date and time, and it will be by default set to never expire. So if we were to create content and not change this setting, then the content will be available to everybody, and it will continue to be available until it is either archived or changed. If we would like to specify a specific time and date for the publishing, so if, for example, we're creating an article today, but we know it's only going to be relevant for the month of October, we can select start date, 1st of October, and the time, and then we know that it's not going to be relevant in November, then we can change the expiry to the end of October and a specific time. That means that only once that date and time has occurred, the content will be available in the system, and then it will automatically archive once the expiry date and time has been reached. So this can be done at the time of creating the content. We also have the ability to define when the next review should be. So as an author, if we're creating something that we know again is perhaps only going to be relevant for a month, we don't necessarily want to hide it or set an expiry, but we know that we should review this on a specific date and time. So if we want to review this in 6 months' time or in a month, then we can select this. And what will happen is a task will appear in the author's work list, a review task to come into this content and review it to see if any changes are required. Okay. Next section is the access control. So this is when you're creating content, you have the ability to apply entitlements. And these entitlements mean that if they've been applied to the content, only agents or teams that have the entitlement in the settings will be able to view this content. So in this example, if we're creating this piece of content and we've applied the confidential entitlement, that means that once it's published, only agents or teams that have been given the confidential entitlement will be able to view and search for that content. Anyone that does not have that entitlement will not be able to view or search. So this is giving restricted access on content through entitlements. So obviously it's important to explain that by using this, it means that you're potentially hiding content from agents, so it should be done with full understanding of knowing what is happening when you add an entitlement. That if you add entitlement, it's only visible to people that also have that entitlement given in their setting. And then finally, attachments. So we have the ability to add attachments into the content. So we would browse the attachment list and be able to add them into here, and they would then be visible from this piece of content. Are there any questions around those content settings? Publishing or access attachments? Nope, all seems clear. Okay. And then the next one is the additional content information. So this is on every single piece of content that is created. It will have these additional settings that are mostly automatically added and can see the full history of the content. So we can see that once it's published, it will have a unique content ID. It will have the content owner that can be edited if required. It will have the locale, so whichever language or locale it has been created in, when it was last edited and who by. Also have version history as well, so we can see the different versions to see perhaps how many times has it been updated or how many times has it been published. And we can see the full history of the versions. The status, so perhaps it's under review or awaiting published or it's a draft. The status will indicate that there. And we can see who currently has it locked. Yep, sure.
What is this migratable which is enabled here?
Migratable up top. So that means that if if the admin was to try to migrate the content out of the system, you can export the content out of the system. If you haven't got this ticked, then that would not be included in that export.
Okay.
So I think by default it's always ticked, but if there was any reason that you would not want your content to be migrated, then you would untick it. It's really only relevant if, for example, you're migrating content between environments. It's not something that's heavily used by a lot of customers, but it is something that is available and it is just by default set on every piece of content that you can decide if you want it to be migratable or not.
It's migratable among different environment or?
Yes, so you would, for example, the admin can create an export. It creates a jar file, and then that file can be added into any other environment of the same version, for example.
Okay.
Okay. It's sometimes I've seen it used in the past sometimes for training. So if they're putting content into a training system, they can then migrate it easily into the next training system. For example, if customers typically just have one level of environments, then it isn't heavily used. But as I said, it's something that is available. Okay.
What is must read?
Yep. So that was one that I was just coming to. I'll quickly talk about locked by first. So locked by means that perhaps there's a current agent working on the content. So this is showing who currently has it locked. So you wouldn't be able to access it if it was locked by a specific user. And then yes, must read. So this is a flag that's available on all the content while being created. If it's selected in must read, it will then be filterable by the agents because the agents, as one of their filter features, will be able to look for things that have been marked must read. So if you say that this is something, an article, you've put all your tags in, but you want it to be marked as must read, then the agents then have that ability to quickly search for things within the current filters that they have applied to see if anything has been marked as must read by the author, and then they would be filtered out separately in the search results. Okay.
Rachel, if you
Yes.
permit, we have a very short break for 15 minutes so that attendees can have their prayer and short break.
Yep, most certainly for 15 minutes.
So, yeah, so we will gather at 12:45 here Saudi time.
Yep. Okay. Perfect.
Okay. Guys, let us gather again at 12:45. Maybe you can have your prayer and tea or coffee during this time. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. Start,
Okay.
Rachel.
Perfect. Okay, so we have a few remaining slides on the authoring topics, and then I will go into a demonstration to show you the system. We were talking about the metadata, additional information, and we just discussed the additional content on the screen here. So the ID, owners, version, status, locked by, and the must read Was there any questions around any of these additional settings?
Actually, I have a question.
Mhm.
Which all type of users can lock an article, like or the reviewer or like who or
Yes, all user types can create content, if that's the question.
oh here in this additional content information, there's logged by. So is it like an manager can log an article so that the author cannot edit it? Is that the functionality?
Yes, it's not something that the manager needs to do though. As soon as the author or manager is editing a piece of content, the system will automatically lock that. So as long as the manager, for example, is editing the content, that will be considered locked to the manager. So he doesn't need to do anything explicitly to lock it. By being in it and editing it, then the system will lock it to that user.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. And then adding attachments. So the attachments field should only be used for things, for example, that should not be returned in search results. As I've said, the content of an attachment isn't something that is added to the KM index. So any of the words used inside the attachment will not be visible to the search. So these should be for things like heavily branded items or PowerPoints, PDFs that can be easily searched on using, for example, the title or the description that is given to the attachment at the time it's created. So you wouldn't attach something that would be something that would be heavily searched for. That would be something that you would want to use to look to use an article, because all of the keywords and phrases in that would be added to the index, and that means that any words in that article will be searchable from the agent's perspective. So attachments are only searchable from the title and description perspective. Okay. The next item to talk about is translations. So when you're creating a piece of content, it defaults to be in what we call the locale of your setting. So as each agent is created in the system, they will be given a default content locale. And that means that when they're creating content by default, their setting will be set to whichever locale has been selected. So for example, if my agent has the content locale of ENGB, that means by default when I'm creating content, it will be in that locale. If I require to create any translations, one of the areas in the additional settings is the translations option. And when we select to create a translation, that is then how we can create that version of the content within a different locale. So for example, if we want to create it and author it in French, German, or Japanese, then we can do so using this translations from that single source. So when we're creating the source content, so the first item, it will, as I said, be in the default locale that we've selected. We then create the content and we then enable the languages that we want to translate in. So it can be one or many. Once we've then created that, we can then perform the translation, go into these articles and create it in the required format and a language for those different locales, and then we would publish. And these would then be the translations of a single source. So we would have one piece of content that can then be visualized, can be viewed in these different languages. So it's not creating, for example, 3 different articles. You're creating 3 different translations of the one source article or piece of content that the agent can then use the language drop down to visualize and show whichever language that they want to view the content in. So when you're authoring, when you select the Create Translations button, you then can select out of the list of locales what you want to translate it into, and it will create a draft translation item for each one you create. And then you have that readily available to go and add in the enters. Was there a question? Was there a question there? No?
The translation, is it automatic or is it like the author when creating the article, he can use it? Or like when the agent is viewing the article?
No, it's sorry. No, it's not automatic. What it does is it gives the author the ability to translate it themselves. So you're creating one piece of content, and then you can translate that content into different selected locales. It's not an automatic translation.
Will the translation come in the search?
So you can search in the different locales as long as you're filtering on the specific locale you want to search for. So what that means is when you're in when the agent's looking for content, one of the filtering availabilities would be to select, for example, French. When the locale French is selected, they will be able to search for keywords in French, and then that content will be returned. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, yes, it's clear.
Okay.
Only these three languages, or we can, Arabic is
No,
there?
that's just an example. There are lots of all the main languages are included. So Arabic, French, German, Dutch. There's other locales available. This is just an example in this screenshot here, but there are others available.
Okay, clear.
Okay. Okay. The last step, talking about saving and submitting the content. So as we've spoken about, our author has the two options of saving as a draft, so saving to come back for later, or submitting for review and putting that then through the workflow process. So when we're submitting for review, as we said, that then adds a task to the work list and targets that task to the reviewer team. So anyone that's in as a reviewer, when they're looking at their work list, they will have items that have been submitted for review that they can then look up and review that piece of content. Okay, so it's come to that time where I'm going to log into the system and give you a demonstration of what we've covered so far. If there's any questions or if anyone wants me to explain anything on the screen, then please let me know, and I'll be able to give you a further explanation if required. So can everyone see my screen okay? Hopefully everyone can see my screen okay. So this is the engagement management system. We're going to log in. And for our training today and in the next couple of days, we will be seeing this screen when we first log in. This is the profile selector. So because we're going to be going in with all the different roles, multiple roles, we've been assigned more than one profile, which means when we're logging in, we need to tell the system which profile we want to access. You can only use one profile at a time. So for this example, I'm going to go in as the author. If you have your agent set up to only have one profile, so for example, the business has one person and they only have the authoring profile, when they log in, it will automatically open up. They won't get this screen. This screen only appears if you have more than one profile that you need to select. So for this example, I'm going in as the author, and I'll open up the profile from here. Okay, so my initial screen you can see here, we have on our left-hand panel, we've got searching capabilities similar to what the agent will have if we want to search for specific content. We have our keyword search where we can type in any keywords, and I also have by default last edited by me open as my author view. So you can see here that these are 4 items that were last edited by myself. And if I select these, then our right hand panel becomes a preview of what that piece of content is. So this is an FAQ, and you can see here the data that's inside that piece of content. Okay, so the area that I'm going to go to first, coming in as an author, I'm going to create an article. Down in this bottom left-hand corner, you can see here that I have a tab with new, and I have an icon for each of the different content types. So selecting these will then create a new article, alert, FAQ, segment, or upload. If we were talking about the different translations, as you can see, oh, I've expanded that. By default, my locale is English. The drop down will have any other locales that are available that if we want to select. So if, for example, we wanted to specifically create something with an Arabic locale, I can select this, and then when I select the article, it will create that article in the Arabic locale.
Excuse me, I cannot see the left banner. It's out of the screen.
Oh, okay. Is anyone else having that issue? I'll try and make my screen a little smaller, perhaps. Can you see it now?
Yes, yes. Thank
Yes, okay, cool. Okay, so yeah, so we can change it from our default locale if we wish into any of the other locales available, and then when we select the button, it will create it in the locale that we have selected. But by default, it will be whichever content locale has been assigned to that agent and their settings. So we'll create an article, and you can see it's opened up the compose area for us. We've got our title, so we can type in our title, and we have our different tabs, so public information, private information, tags, and related content. And then on our right hand side, our extra information, the metadata for additional content, translations, publishing dates, and access control. So we'll begin just by populating something into here. I have some ready-made content just to copy and paste in so that we have an example. So in this example, I would give my title. I'm going to have some, for example, key facts about Puerto Rico. And then I'm going to, from my pre-made piece of content, I've just got in a Word document, I'm going to paste some in. And the formatting, if you're copying and pasting from another source, you can decide to keep the formatting existing or remove it. So I'm just going to remove, and you can see here that this is the data that I had, and I'd added it in from a Word document, but I can also manually type in as well. So if I type in here, just a heading, so I can select this. I can then change this to a heading banner, for example, to make that clear up the top. And as we spoke about the editor, this is the default. If I want to expand, then I get the full list of all the editing features available. The full screen one, which is commonly used, can be used to populate the full screen. So you can see here now that my full browser screen is now the editor, so I don't have any other space being used up by the application. And then I can simply select again to reduce once I'm finished if I like. Okay, so that's some text added in. We can now perhaps use the insert image to put in an image. And here we're given the image gallery. So we can see here that we can choose a file from our system if we want to upload the image to the system to then use. Or we also have the list of already uploaded images that are already in the system. So I'm going to identify this one. You can see here it gives you a preview and the data when it was added. And to insert it, simply click Insert Image, and you can see it's been added into here. Now obviously this is quite big, so what we can do is we can right click into the image settings, and we can give it a specific width and height so that it's not taking up as much room. Okay. So this is the information that we've added into the public information. If we wanted any private information, we could add it into here. It's not mandatory. If you don't have anything added, then the private information tab would not show. So for just now, we'll leave this blank. All of our information that's required is in the public section. And then come to tags, where you can see we've got our 4 different tag sets that we should use to categorize where this article should be. So just for this training purposes, the knowledge base, we have default and training. So I'll just select training. And then we have lots of different options to search through for product. So I can either start typing in here and it will look for something specific. Or as I said, I can select the add button and I can look through the whole list and I can search. So if I can select cruises, for example, hit apply, it'll add that tag here. And I can also remove as well if I've added incorrectly. So adding through the button or typing and then selecting. You can also scroll through from here as well. So let's just add in some tags that are relevant. Let's add in some region tags. You can add more than one tag. You can add as many tags as necessary to make sure that it's categorized accordingly. And then let's do an example of adding related content. So if I look for something that's already published in the system, if I can remember what it's called, article. So we can see here, let's relate this article here. So I've identified this as the article existing, and if I hit relate, I then go into my related content, you can see here that this has now been added. We can use the recycle bin icon here to remove if necessary. And we can now preview if we save. We can now close this. And also showing the publishing date as well. So you can see here it's defaulted to starting from now and never expire. And we can decide if we want to review when we would want to review it. It defaults to a year's time, but we can set this to any date. Access controls, as we said, we can add a level of restriction here. So typically entitlements are the best and suggested way to do this. Rather than giving it to a specific agent or team, entitlements, we can then say perhaps the complaints entitlement and assign this to here. And that means that only people with that complaints entitlement will be able to view and search for this article. Okay, so we can see from the additional information the locale is currently ENUS. We're on version 0.1 and the current owner is the user. My user is Verdant Trainer. We can mark it, for example, as must read, and then that would be available to be searched for by that flag. And the last thing to show is obviously our translations. So we've got this current version, and if we want to create a translation, we would select this. And then from that drop down that we saw here, we can then select the other list that would come up. I can't currently save just now, I think because I'm in as an admin. I'll need to log out and log back in to show you this. But for creating the article, this is the main screen and the main editor that we would be using. Once we're finished, then we do have some checking available, for example, spell check. So if we select the spell check, then it will come up with any errors, and we can right click and we can do all the expected functionality. We can add to dictionary, ignore, or we can use any of the suggested spellings from here. So right clicking would do this, and then we can turn this off once we're ready. And that is how we are authoring our content. So that was an article. Oh, yep.
Rachel, now we have this English interface in front of us. How far we have achieved in Variant knowledge management system with other language interfaces?
Do you mean the actual application itself?
Yeah, the interface which we are seeing now, actual
Yeah.
application. Yeah.
Yep. So the application itself, the UI, is translatable into other languages, as long as what we call the language packs have been installed. It's not something I have too much knowledge about, But I know that definitely if the development team have added in, then the application will be formatted and be visible in that language.
Okay, do we have Arabic ready or is it under development? Arabic interface.
I'm not aware of any changes for Arabic. I know that our customers that currently use Arabic have the English interface. I'm not sure if that was a decision or if it's something that they are waiting for translations for. Dagna or Suhani would be the best people to ask that, to be honest. I'm not quite sure for Arabic specifically.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any other questions around the authoring, the tabs that we've been into there, or anything else that I can cover during this time? Nope. Okay. So this was an article, as we said. If we were creating any of the other types, for example, if I was to select here from new, a new alert, we have the same information, same screen, only you can see here our icon is an alert. We've got our public and private information, tags unrelated, and all the same editor capabilities. When we click for FAQs, this is slightly differently. We can see it's public answer and private answer rather than information. So as we said, it can be a simple answer and question. So your question can be in the title. So for example, are transfers included? And then you could have your public answer as written in here. So this would be one FAQ and it's one simple question and answer. Or other ways that customers have utilized these is to group them together. So for example, you could have your question embedded in here and your questions would be questions about transfers and you could group them all together. For example, we can then perhaps use this to have a look at the expandable areas. So if I select this, my header could be our transfers included. So that would be the heading of the expandable area, and then the body would be the content. So that then means when you're viewing this in the as an agent, this would be the heading that you could then expand to see the information. So this is an example of using an FAQ to cluster categorized questions together. Again, all the keywords in the title and here will be used. So if an agent comes along and searches for the word transfer, then this would be something that would return in the results. Similarly, if it was done as an individual as well. So there's no real restriction on whether to do it this way or to have one question per FAQ. It's completely up to the kind of customer's desire of how they want it to be formatted. Okay, so that was an FAQ.
I have a question.
Yep.
Who can add new tags if needed?
The tags, that would be the knowledge management admin. So someone that has been given the administration profile could add new tags.
Okay, so on the first level, like or the manager, none of them can add new tags.
No, it has to be the admin.
Okay, and how about insert template? Is it predefined by the admin again, or
The what template, sorry?
there was an option to insert
Oh,
template under public
yep,
information?
yep. So
So who
templates,
creates the template?
the templates are also created by someone with the admin profile.
Okay, okay.
So the templates are here, and again, they can be categorized into the different folders. These are again created by the admin, and then if you select, so for example, if we just use pros and cons table, this will be some sort of table, I imagine, with formatting. Yes, and then we can use this. But yes, the templates and the tags are maintained by the admin profile. Okay. The other content type, upload. So you can see here, this is slightly different. We have file information tab, tags as similarly seen, and related content. So the only tab that we have here is file. So you would search and select the file that you want to upload, and then you give it a unique title and description. And this is when I mentioned that only these two fields would be indexed and searchable in the system. So none of the keywords or phrases inside the actual attachment itself would be indexed, only these two fields. So this is where we would stress to customers that it must be something that's easily identifiable by the title and the description that you give it. And if it's something that perhaps agents would look to more want to search for the content inside it, that is something that perhaps utilizing something like the article would be better, because then everything, all the content would be created and indexed inside here. Sorry everyone, if you just give me 2 seconds, I have someone knocking at my door. I will be back with you in a couple of seconds. Sorry about that, I'm back. So are there any other questions around authoring? Nope, no other questions or anything else I can explain for everyone? Okay. Okay, so if we go back to the presentation, I'll continue going through the functionality. Okay, so that has looked at authoring. So the next stage to look at would be the reviewing process. So the reviewing articles consists of picking up the item from the work list and taking the work, looking at it, reviewing the article or whichever content is being created, and then two options of approving or rejecting with comments. So we can see here that this screenshot is now showing us the work list. So we can see that we're in this tab, and we can see that we have some search fields here that we can look for specific types. So we'd be able to look for content, authoring, or feedback. So for just now, it'd be looking at things for review. When we search, then the items in our work list will appear. So you can see here that we have one item, and it's of activity under review. So we can see that this is something that we should take to review. And the other information that we have is the author. So you can see here the name of the author. This is their name, and in brackets is their username. And then, as I've spoken about, the different work items in the work lists have targets. So you can see here that this item for under review is targeted to the content reviewer, but also the content manager. So this means that anyone that is accessing the system as a reviewer or manager would be able to take this item and review it. This is also the subject of the content that's been created as well, and we can see the time that it was created as well. So from here, as a reviewer, if we select this item and then use the Take Work button, it will open this item, and then we can start to review the article. So you can see here up the top, we have the submission information. We've got the unique content ID, the author, and the last time that it was modified. If we want to quickly check the version history, then we can. We can see any previous versions of this article. And then under here, we have the work item details. So as we said, we can see that it's status under review. It was submitted by this author and at this time. And we can see here any notes that were left by the author. There will also be any further notes visible through the View All Notes button. So if there's been any other notes added to this article, we can then read those as well. And down in the bottom, we can see there's the content preview area. So this is actually previewing the content and what it's going to look like to the agent. So we can see public and private information, any of the tags or related items as well. And then as a reviewer, you can see down the bottom, we have our different action buttons. So as we said, save for later. So we would save this back into our work list with ourselves as a target. So we're saving for ourselves later. Or simply restoring it, putting it back into the work list untouched. Or we can reassign to someone more specific. Or we can delete, we can take this out of the work list and it will require no further review. We can edit it ourselves, so if there's something very quickly needing change, then we can do the addition here. We can reject and give some comments back to the author to say perhaps why we're rejecting it, giving them some context. Or we can approve. Once we approve, this would then close. We would give our additional comments, and then this would then go to the manager's work list for the manager to pick up to then read and ultimately either approve or send back. Are there any questions around the reviewing process? Is everything understood in terms of the work list and the items shown, taking it from the work list, then understanding where to review from? Is there any questions?
Hi, I have a question. So in the reviewing state, reviewer and manager have same role and privilege, right? Manager can edit and reject, or he can reassign.
Yes, the manager has shared capabilities as the reviewer. Yes.
Okay.
So the manager ultimately has all access, if you like.
And one more thing about the inbox.
Yep.
Is there a pull option like the reviewer, they can see the list and select the content, or will the system automatically assign something directed towards him?
No, they will have the full list. They'll have visibility of the full list in the work list. Anything, for example, if they're a reviewer, all of the items up for review would then be visible in their list.
Yeah. Suppose we have different teams. Okay, I have different teams, so I don't want other team to, I want the reviewer of one team. Should see only their articles. I don't want him to see other teams' articles. So I am I belong to one team, and I am the agent, and I will be having one reviewer. So that reviewer will be from the same team, and he should not see. He should see only my article to review. He should not see the other articles from other departments for review.
Okay. So I understand the scenario. The way that the system is currently configured, though, it is shared access by the role. So if you're in the system as role reviewer, the system doesn't have the capability to know that you're perhaps a reviewer from team A or team B. The way that it will work is it gives it to the role of reviewer overall, and everyone has that shared access to those items. Current customers that we have that perhaps have more the scenario of what you've explained, they utilize the use of the creating queues, and then they have the triage team who do the manual selection to make sure that each team is given their own items in the queue. But the initial creation is a shared pot, if you like, of everything for the reviewers. It's not separated out into teams by default when you're creating initially.
Okay.
So it would be a case of perhaps creating some queues and then defining a process for adding the specific items for that team into either like a queue for that team or a queue for the area. Okay. Any other questions around the reviewer? Nope. Okay, and then we'll go into the last set of tasks, which is belonging to the manager, which is publishing the articles. So again, managers are accessing the work list, identifying the items that are awaiting publication, opening up the article and doing a review. They then have full visibility of all comments left by authors and reviewers. Same preview of the content as well. And then they have that ultimate power of publishing or rejecting with comments. So again, coming to the work list, and you can see here the status is awaiting publication. So this is something that's been through the review process and is ready for the last check. So when we use the take work button on this item, we can see it's very similar to what we saw before. The submission information, who it was submitted by, and you can see here that the reviewer's name is now the work item creator, and any notes that have been added or left by the author or reviewer, we can view all to see every note as well. And again, the content preview as well. And it's only at this stage, once we select publish, that this item will then go into the system and be indexed and used and be available to be searched by the KM agents. So up until this point, this item will not be visible by any agents. It's only following the publish that it would then be available in the system to search. Okay. Any questions around the publication or anything around the manager's role? As we said, the manager's work list will always will also have the items for review as well. The manager can step in at that stage of the process as well to help or to publish. So there's not the mandatory level of steps that we've seen author, reviewer, and manager. The manager can act as the reviewer as well if needed, if the customer doesn't require all 3 stages. So if, for example, they just want people to be able to create and publish within one, then the manager role can be used for this, and they would just create the content and straight away publish. Okay, any questions around this? Nope. Okay, so what I'll do is I will get up an example of something that we can push through the review process. I will publish the article, and then what we can do is we can watch that go through the review and publish process. So I'm just in the background logging back into the system. And sorry, just give me a few seconds. everyone see the full screen there? Let me know if you can, and I can make it smaller. Okay, so I've logged into the system now as the reviewer, and I'm going to go to the work list tab, and I'm going to look for content, and I'm going to search for these here. So content type in the search field, and then I hit search, and we can see here that we have one item that is ready for under review. You can see that the subject is the facts about Puerto Rico, the name of the author, and it's currently, as I said, with the reviewer and manager, and we've also got the unique ID as well. So if I select this item and select take work, then you can see here that I've got all the information as we discussed. So we've got the unique ID, who it was created by, the version, and the notes, and then I can scroll down and I can see and review the full content and tags and any related content as well. Okay, so as a reviewer, we've read this. Perhaps we think there's no issues, nothing needs to be added. Then we use our ability to click approve, and then we give some optional notes. We can say, for example, approve by reviewer, no issues. Once we confirm that, it will then close, and then that work item will now be sitting with the manager. So if we log out, and now if we are pretending that we are the manager, with the manager access, when we come to our work list and we look for content, we can now see that we have our content. It's now only with the managers, because managers are the only ones that can publish, and we can see the activity is awaiting publication. So again, if we select the activity, select the take work, then we can see here that we have the same information about the content, the workflow. We can see that it's been submitted by this reviewer, and see the contents. We click view notes now, we can see that we've got some notes by the author and the reviewer, and we then have the ability to use our action buttons down the bottom. So let's, for this one, select publish, optional notes, let's say publish version 1 for example, and now this will be available to the agents through the front end for searching. So as a manager, of course, we do have the ability to search as well. So if we now look to here, we can see that our facts about Puerto Rico is marked as published, the icon here, and we can see all the information again about where the access control, if any, or any of the other metadata here as the manager. Okay, are there any questions around that workflow going into the work list at the different stages? Obviously, I was pretending to be each level of the role. That's why I was having to log out and log back in. But ultimately, the users would be accessing the system with their one profile and have the ability to do any of the actions for that specific profile that they're in with. No questions around that? Okay, we'll move on. The next section. Question?
One question.
Sure.
For the related content, suppose we are relating content 1 with content 2, like article 1 with article 2. So will it work both ways? If we are opening article 2, will article 1 be shown under the related content, or we have to give it
No.
separate?
Yes, you would need to relate from both areas. If you relate 1 to 2, it doesn't automatically relate 2 to 1. So
It doesn't.
if for example I'm looking at Puerto Rico and I click on related content, you can see here there's no link back to the related content from Puerto Rico down here, just the tags. So you would need to edit both if you wanted it to work both ways.
Okay, got it. And for reassigning, the manager can reassign on any level or only between the managers or reviewers, or he can reassign to an author as well?
No, any level. Of
Any
course, it
level.
will depend on the stage that the work item is at. Obviously, when you're reassigning things, you need to make sure you're not trying to, for example, reassign something that's awaiting publication, so for a manager, to an author, for example, because they won't have visibility. But yes, the manager, when they have that work item, they can either reassign to another manager or another team, or if they have decided to go down the route of creating queues, then they could reassign it to a different queue.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No other questions? Okay, move on. Our next topic is the reusable content. So content existing and exploring the different kinds of way to reuse that content in a way that can give an advantage of time consuming tasks that perhaps would take longer, and to make sure that you're getting the best usage out of the content that's already created. So we've already seen an example of related, but there are other areas that we can reuse this content. So for example, we have embedded content. So we can take content that already exists and we can embed it as a clickable link inside a piece of content. So for example, a knowledge article and an embedded link to read another article about something that is related to whatever has been written about. So this is an embedded link, embedded content. Okay. There's reuse content, so you can take a copy of the content that is already inside an existing piece, like an article, and by reusing the content, this means that the contents of that will then be embedded inside that article. So when you're the author or the manager, it will look as a link, but when the agent is then viewing this article, if it's been reused, then you'll be reading through the article, and when you get to this section, this will the body and the contents inside that article will appear as one within this article. So you're essentially reusing that piece of content by creating it within another article, for example. So this also means that if you're using your keyword searches, if words are being used, that any words in the index for this reused content that's been added will also be returned if this article is searched for. So it's adding the keywords into this article. And then there's also related content. So as we've seen in the example, adding the content as a link, and it will appear down in the bottom section, and you'll be able to select that and open any related content. And we also, as I've spoken about, our different type segments. So being able to reuse content, for example, addresses or maybe terms and conditions, disclaimers, things like that. These can be used as a segment throughout different articles, and having the one source of segment means that you're only having to update one item, and it will dynamically change throughout if it's been referenced in other articles. So again, if 10 articles have used a segment containing an address, if the address was to change, then simply the segment would be updated and all 10 articles would automatically then reference the new address. Okay. And we also have the use of templates, so not just reusing the content, reusing, for example, formatting. So using templates for such things as we saw a short example just before of table layouts, product information layouts, things like that. If the organisation create them in templates in a structured way, that means that they can be reused as the authors when creating content, and it also means that the content is consistent. Because the templates are accessible from the author's point of view and they're maintained by the agents, they're maintained by the admins, sorry, that means that everyone is using and accessing the same version of the template, and it means that the content is all using the same layouts, for example, if the templates are being reused. Okay, so I'll just go in and give you some examples of the reusing content. So if we go in and we, first of all, perhaps let's create a segment. So you can see here when we're creating segment, we've got our segment icon, our additional information, but we just have the two tabs. We've got the information itself and tags. Segments are not going to be searchable by agents. They're not going to appear as different searchable items, but they will, if used inside articles, appear embedded. But for the purpose of authors and managers, they will be able to search for them if we're adding tags, etc. So these should still be used to be able to help classify and categorize these. So let's just add some tags. And for information, let's just add in, as we said, an address. And okay, so some contact details. Okay. Now, as per the different content types, segments can be put through the reviewing process to make sure they're correct, and then the authoring process. Because I'm currently logged in as a manager, I have the publish button, so I'm simply going to select publish for this example just now so that we can quickly then access that inside our new article. So I've now created that segment. So let's now create a brand new article. And for example, we're going to look now in this search area here. We want to look for that contact details. You can see here it's brought back the segment. We can have a look. Yep, this is the one that we wanted. And if we select insert, we then have the option to insert it into the public or the private text area. So if we select the public information, we can then confirm. And it's going to appear only to the authors and the authoring teams as this link with a unique reference ID. This is just for the composing and authoring. What this means though is when it is viewed by an agent, this will then show the information inside the segment. But to the authors, it will look like this reference link, and they can continue to write some information. So okay, here's spell check. Okay, so segment, one of the other options that we had was to embed. So if I look for something else in the system to embed, perhaps let's embed this FAQ. So we've got some information here. If I click embed, so I want to make sure my cursor is where I want it to go. So I'm going to select down here. If I click embed into my public information, how we want it to display, we can change this if we like. And again, it's going to come in as this reference. And when viewed by an agent, this will then flow and show the contents of that FAQ that we have added. Okay, so if I label this as embedded, just so that we can see them. Okay, and then the last option was to reuse. So for example, if we want to take this alert here, if we use the reuse button, make sure our cursor is where we want it to insert into, select the public information, and we can see here that it's then added the reuse here. I can now save this as a draft. Once it's saved as a draft, as an author, manager, or reviewer, you can then preview. So what we're going to do is preview for agent. And this then shows us the article that we've created. So you can see here, the segment reference has been replaced with the contents. And the embedded below is now a clickable link that will open up that FAQ that I've embedded. And we've also got the knowledge article that we then can view from here as well. Okay, so that's us using the preview feature to be able to have a quick insight into what it's going to look like for the agent before we've published it, to make sure it looks as we expect. Okay, are there any questions around the reusable content or adding in reusable content? The key thing to remember is it must exist already in the system. So this searching knowledge section, for adding any of these in, it must be something that's published in the system already. It can't be something that's perhaps a draft or waiting publication. It needs to be published to be able to then insert it into this. Okay, I'll add some tags. And I will publish this as well, just so that we've got that example in there. Okay, so if there's no questions, I'll move on to the next section, if that's okay. So a quick topic about searching. Obviously when you're creating the content in the system, you do still perhaps need to search, make sure that there's nothing already created that you're going to already add. But the searching functionality will go into a lot more detail on Wednesday when we look at the agent training, because ultimately the agent is going to be the one doing the most in-depth searching, but we'll touch on it lightly for just now, because obviously as the authoring team, you will be searching for content as well. So as we said, we've got our different areas. We've got the search cloud here that will show all of the tags or all of the elements of searching that has been added. We can browse for the tags. When we've added tags to the content, we can specifically filter on those tags and then be returned all of the items that have been created with those tags assigned. Or we can also use the content category. So if we want to use any of the specific tick boxes to remove any of the types, if we know we want to only look at articles, for example, we can get rid of all the other type categories and then filter through this. Or we can search again for the tags specifically if we know we want to apply specific tags to our search. We've also got our keyword search, so obviously you can use any keywords or phrases that you know or you want to search for and free type those in and then search, and any combination of what you've typed here and your tags on the left will be used to show you the results in the results panel. Okay. To talk about when we're searching, something else that we spoke about when we're creating content in different languages. When we've created an article in more than one locale, more than one language, when we're viewing it, for example, this article, we can use the translation drop down to select and view the different translations. So in this article, we've created it in English and in French. So we're currently looking and search for the English one. If we want to then view the translation, this drop down can be used, and once it's selected, you would then, as you can see here, see the French translation of that article. So this is once that you're looking at an article or a piece of content, you can use that drop down. Before you get to that stage, you can use the multilingual search from your search bar here. So if you want to allocate a specific language to search for, then you can select it in the language tags down the bottom, and then you'll be able to use your keyword searches in whichever language you've selected, and then as you can see, the results will be in whichever language has been selected from this setting. The default, as I've spoken about before, the default will be whichever content locale has been set for that agent. So if the agent has been set up by the admin to have English as the default, then the language will be defaulted to English, but to select another language, they can simply select it from the filtering list, and then the content can be searched for in any different language that has been added. Okay. Any questions around searching? As I said, we'll go into a lot more detail about the in-depth searching from the agent's perspective. Okay. Okay, so one of the last topics to talk about is updating the knowledge. So we've talked about creating it, putting it through the workflow, and then ultimately publishing it. But now we can talk about what we want to do or how we can go about updating the content if we need to either amend it, change it, or add anything to the content that's currently in the system. So we'll look at the steps required, perhaps taking in feedback, updating the steps, and then what's required to either archive or delete content that is perhaps identified as no longer relevant or required in the system. So as we touched on before, agents do have the ability to give feedback on the content. Those feedback forms then go to the work list of the author, and the author can read that feedback, take it on board, and either action the content accordingly, whether that's updating the content or perhaps feeding back to the agent that nothing will be done, it's perhaps an error on the agent's side, or archiving or deleting any content that perhaps is out of date and no longer required. So once the feedback has been given by the agent, it would then go to the feedback queue and be able to be visible by the author in the work list. So you can see here that we've got the feedback. When we go to the work list, we can then search and we can pick up each of these items and view the item to then feedback. When we're updating the content, so we would open up this feedback. When we're updating it, we have the same view. We've got the full information about the submission, so who gave the feedback, what was the feedback. So we can see here, the feedback was submitted by this agent. They didn't give a star rating or any other information, and this was what the feedback was. It was out of date. Can we get more recent coverage than this? So then we have our ability. As the author, we can edit the content. If from reading the feedback we've identified that the content should no longer be live, it should be unpublished, then we can archive the content, and then any archived content will not be viewed by the agents longer because they're no longer published. If we archive content, it is hidden from the agent's view. Anyone in the workflow process, so managers, authors, and reviewers, they will still be able to see the authored content and they'll be able to republish if required at any time. So once we've then decided perhaps that the content does need updated, a new version will be created and then the updates will be made. And as we said, if the feedback process has been told to update the agent with what the feedback was, then we need to save the feedback outcome. So what did we do? So the outcome of this feedback was that we updated the content and we give some notes and context into what we did. So we've now updated it. And this feedback would then go to the agent that has given the feedback if they've opted to be notified. So I can show you that now. I've added into our process the feedback. So if I log in as an author into the system, if I go to the work list, I can then search. I don't want content this time. I can select content feedback. Then we can see here that we've had some feedback left. We can see, identify this by the activity. So it's content feedback. We can see who left the feedback and the subject of what the feedback was. Again, anyone in the content management team can see this, so it's against authors, reviewers, and managers. So managers and reviewers do have visibility of the process, but it's authors as a target can then open this work item, and you can see here the information of the feedback. So who gave the feedback and the comments, and we can see here that this is the article that they've given the feedback on. Okay, so perhaps we can edit the content. We can see a new version's been created. We can perhaps add this. change it in some way, and then submit for review. Okay, and then once we've done that, we can then submit. And here is now where we tell the system what the outcome was. So what did we do? And the options are that no action was taken. Perhaps the feedback was not necessary to take any action, so we've just simply closed it. Or updated the content, removed, archived the content, or we've perhaps reached out to the content author. Perhaps there's a bigger change required. Then we've contacted them to discuss what would need to happen. So for our example there, we updated the content. We give some notes. And we can then select confirm. And that will then close the item here. Okay. Are there any questions around the feedback process that we just saw? Is everything clear to everyone? No, no questions? Okay. Okay, so that was updating the content. Now to talk about the archiving or restoring. So as we said, if at any point any of the content is identified as being out of date or needing to be archived, then the authoring team and the management have that ability to be able to archive, but also restore as required, so bringing anything back as well. The only items in the system that can actually be fully deleted are things that are drafts. Anything that's actually been published that has existed in the system, the most you can do is archive. You cannot fully delete. To delete content, as we said, has to be status draft. Otherwise, anything else, the archive action here on anything, this is an article for example, selecting the archive link would then mark that status as archive and it would no longer be searchable in the system. So if we're looking, for example, for an alert that's perhaps out of date, then we can select it here. And as you can see, there's the archive link here. Selecting this, you can see that we can then give archive notes. And once we refresh, we should see now that the alert has been marked. If I can find alert. As archived, I should be able to find it if I maybe check my filters. To see, yep, you can see here that I need to include it. I've deleted it from my search there, so if I do this, and you can see here that that's the article here, the alert, sorry, and it's marked as archived. You can see here status archived, and if I want to republish, then I can restore it using this icon here. It creates a draft first in case we need to make any additions, and then again through the process of reviewing and publishing. Okay. So you can see in any of the results here, only for the authors, admins, and reviewers, the status is available in here. We can see we've got some published, under review, drafts, and things like that. So we can see the status here as well. Okay, are there any questions around that section, around restoring or drafts of content, anything at all? No? Okay, so it's come to the time for our scheduled break. We were due to take an hour's break. Is everyone still okay with this timing? If we break now and take an hour's break to come back at 3 p.m. Your time,
Yes, now we will break for 1 hour and
Yeah.
we'll get after lunch at 3 p.m. Yes.
Yes.
So,
Okay. And
okay.
once we come back after lunch, we will go into the exercises and you will be able to go through the functionality that we've spoken about.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I'll see you in an hour.
Okay. Sure. Bye bye.